Welcome back. Of course, we are moving into our first conversation for our first show for 2019. And one of the first things on many of our minds is how are we going to meet our expectations or responsibilities for this MAGA season? And so we called in our financial expert, Corinne Fuller, to really give us some advice and some tips as to just how we can be able to recover from the Christmas expenses. Good morning, Corinne.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's so nice to have you in.
It is good to be here.
Oh, definitely. But and we will jump directly into it. We know, we've taken those circles across Belize City and of course across the country, and you talk to anybody. It doesn't matter where they are, PG to Corozal, and you ask them, what are you doing? This is Christmas Eve or leading up to. Well, I out the shop, things, this, that, and you forget so much gift.
Yeah.
But it does things to us because it brings the happiness first of getting that gift and seeing that smile, and
then the letdown.
The letdown afterwards.
So
let's jump on into this.
Yeah.
Recovering from Christmas expenses.
Okay.
How do we? Where does it start?
Yes. So first of all, it's important to realize that it starts with you. Really, it's something that you have to decide that you're going to fix. Yeah. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about how not to get there in the first place. Sometimes it is true that we do overextend ourselves, and especially at Christmas time. What are the reasons that we do that? As you say, it brings some kind of happiness to us, and then when reality hits us in January, sometimes we don't plan sufficiently before in order to not get where we are at this point. So probably could talk about what are some of the things that have brought us into a place like this in January. Yes. Usually it's probably buying more gifts than we can afford. Right? Sometimes it is buying stuff for the house that you don't necessarily need. And sometimes it is buying stuff for yourself as well. Food, maybe just overextending ourselves. And that is a reality for a lot of people. And without a plan to know exactly what you want to achieve during the Christmas season and beyond, because sometimes we forget about the beyond. So that is the reason why a lot of us are in the MAGA season situation.
Corinne, I've been asking this question all through December, just to random people, about what would be the estimate that Belizeans spend on Christmas or on everything about Christmas, from the house repairs, renovations, and fixing up, to the gifts and the food items.
2 words, Marlene. Too much.
That's probably the best answer, because I've got a wide range.
Yeah, it is a wide range.
It's always more than we can afford. I think that's kind of
it is always more than we can afford. So here we are in January, and we're in a bind. What to do?
But you know what? Culturally, folks might see. It's just something that I like to do, and I like to see that smile on people's face. And then again, we're so afraid of the fact that you might be hated because you never give Junior one gift, and Junior that you're better picnic. And I think these are the things that contribute. But the question would be that, do you think that these words, "Are you ready for Christmas?" plays with
Probably. Maybe that would have people to stop and think. I would say that you don't always have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to spend a lot of money for Christmas. Having a plan as to what you want to spend is important. And that plan will depend on what you have. It doesn't make sense to borrow to buy Christmas presents. It really doesn't. But sometimes we do that. It doesn't make sense to not have an emergency fund if something happens to you or your child, and you don't have that
car,
money.
Or your stove.
An emergency. And you don't have the funds to take care of that. And then you're splurging on Christmas. So the first thing that you should think about, and here we're going a little back.
I know. I was going to say, let's talk recovery, and then we talk how not to be in that binding in Christmas.
So here you're in January,
and I wanted to share a bit of what I was saying before in the break time. I think if we're to be honest with ourselves, there are a lot of people in this country who have really overextended themselves. And we're not just talking credit cards and loans. We're talking about owing friends and family Perhaps they've gotten quite a few salary advances, so there's nothing to collect.
The bonus.
Yes.
The bonus is spent.
Yeah.
And some even do the payday loans and the loan sharks, which are very high interest, high stress finance options. So I'm coming into January saying, where is it going to come from?
Let's talk about that. Well, let's start with at home, right? There are several things that you can do, but there are two main things. You either, in this month where you're on a bind, you increase your income, what is coming in, or you reduce what you're spending.
Okay.
Those are the two options.
Okay.
So let's start with increasing your income. So what do? Do you have any skills that you could bring to bear at this point? You know,
I might be able to bake a cake or a good meal.
A good meal or something like that. You know, so increase your income as much as possible. So you really would have to move away from the mentality that you had in December and start to look on how can I increase my financial resources in this month of January to get me through. Because the truth of the matter is that you got paid probably the middle of December. And you'd usually get paid the end of December, and that would take you into January. But if you've spent your entire salary for December, you probably are really in a bind in January in truth. So what is there to spend your money on? You have to pay the bills still. You know, you might have school fees to pay, you might have food to buy and things like that. So try to find ways in which you could probably tweak out a little bit more, increasing your income during.
What are some viable options to make more money?
For some people, use your skills. Use your skills. People, I tell you, at this point, you might have people who might want somebody to take down their Christmas ornaments. You understand me? So you try to find some ways.
Let me know if you're doing that job, right? I'll call you, right?
In which you could increase your income. What are the skills you have? Do you do nails? Do you do hair? Do you bake cake? Do you tutor? Do you take care of children? Do you sew? So the other word to think about too is sacrifice. You would much prefer to be lounging in that nice chair that you bought, you know, over Christmas. But if you are serious about getting this thing back on track, you need to figure out some ways in which you could increase your income to get you over this hump. Borrowing for operating expenses doesn't get you very far, you know, because you will always have to be borrowing. So you have to sacrifice. So see how you.
So don't go to get a loan or borrow any more money.
Not if you have overdone it. You know, in the last month.
What about using credit cards to cover expenses?
Well, with credit cards, one of the things that you have to remember is that it is important to pay all the credit card bill because that interest on that credit card is very high. So if you're only paying the minimum, and if you're probably like a lot of people, you probably max out the credit card anyway during December. You know, so one of the things you will have to be looking at is how to make sure that you pay it. You know, you pay that money back. So again, using your credit card for operating expenses. If you cannot pay it back at the end of the month when it's due, it's not a sensible thing to do because you're paying a very high interest on, you know, for operational things.
That's like another loan.
It is another loan. It is another loan. So sacrificing and taking control. It starts in your head, you know. You know, you have to, it's like the diet and doing, you know, it really starts in your head. You have to decide that this is what you want to do.
That you're ready to tighten up. What about selling stuff? Is this a good time to maybe purge your home and sell some stuff?
That's another thing that you could think about. There might be other people who aren't in your situation, you know, who are in the position to probably. So that is something to think about. So it is what works for you. What can you as an individual do? You might be different from the other person, but it is just trying to figure out how to recover before that next payday and be in a position where you have some kind of financial resources without going into a high debt loan to take care of your expenses for the couple weeks in January.
So the first step is increasing that income.
Think about what you can do to get more resources in. And of course the expense side.
Now, how do we cut down expenses during this month?
So it's something that you should be doing throughout the year anyway, you know, with respect to utilities and so on. You know, think about
light bill might go up. So.
Well, that is true too, but and also the bill that you're going to pay will be in January. what you use in January, you're going to pay in February, sorry, you know. So what you're paying now is for what
December.
you probably incurred in December, which will be higher for a lot of people because of the lights and so on, more people at home and so on. So again, you know, it really boils down to being conscious of what is going to happen in January and making a plan to get through it. So with respect to expenses now, how do you cut these? What are the expenses? So you look, what are the expenses that I will have for January?
Can't cut my rent, and I think my landlord will appreciate that.
That's right. That's right. There's something that you can't. And one
can't
of the
tell
things,
BL I'll pay half now, half later. They'll say have half a month of electricity then.
Exactly. So there are some things that you can't get around. You have to pay. But there are some things that you have control over.
Okay.
Which would be
like, for example, food. You know, you could use everything in your cupboard rather than buying extra things, right? So probably use the canned beef with me, the definitely well. Make that be, you know, that turkey, you make a soup or something out of it. You know, you use what you have so that you could look on what's going to be your biggest bill outside of those things that you know you have to pay. More than likely it's food.
Food, gas, transport.
The transportation,
For some people it's entertainment.
Well, that is in your control. So how are you going to entertain if you know, you don't have any food on the table? You understand me? So you cut out those things, you sacrifice.
You sacrifice.
You know, you kind of do a double take and draw back a little bit from the from December.
Would you say that you use minimal lights on the home? Because some people go all out when it comes to lights. But the reason for this is because they'll tell you, I want my kids to be happy, and this is one of the reasons why I put it up. But all those lights will eventually incur you a big bill.
They do.
So would you say minimize the amount of lights?
That's something to do. And discussing with the family is important. You know, I will say that.
That's
because
first.
if you are in this situation and you're saying, well, you know what, we have to really, let's say, use everything in the cupboard rather than going out and buying additional food for the month. You have to get their, you know, buy-in so that you're not the only one banging your head to get these things done, you know. So everybody could understand that January is a little tight and we have to do things a little differently to get us through.
That is such a great point. We've been talking about financial literacy in schools for so long. How much should you tell your child when you're in a financial crunch? So this January, when your child, as any other day, wants something, how do you have that conversation?
Well,
how much should you say?
I always feel that you shouldn't burden your children because it is your responsibility, right? But bringing them in the conversation is important because they would need to do some tweaking themselves. So if you cannot afford that allowance, it's important to say why. And to show them as well, you know, we bought such and such for Christmas, everybody enjoyed it, and so on, but that took a little bit out of what we can do in January. So we're, you know, together we have to work on this thing together so that when February comes, we're in a better position. So I don't think giving them the details about things to burden them, because some children, you know, they really take it on. You don't want to pass that on to your children, but bringing them into the conversation to the extent to which they will have to make some kind of sacrifices.
Like if they'll take sandwiches to school.
Exactly. So things like that, taking lunch to school, these are sensible things that you should think about doing throughout the year. But especially in January, you will have to, you know, you will have to figure it out so that the expense that you will have to incur is a little less. So things like cooking what you have, not throwing away things that, you know, prevent spoilage and so on. Taking lunch to school and to work, you know, not going out and spending a lot of money that you don't have anyway. Not using your credit card for operational things that you know you won't be able to pay for at the end of the month. And really just sacrifice, just, you know, tighten your belt this month, because you can start something that just spiral on and on, and you're in a worse situation as the months go on.
I love the fact that you mentioned, like, especially making sandwiches for the kids so that they could take to school, because there are actually fun ways of of dealing with your children, and it transcends, because then they will eventually take that on. And I think this is one of the ways how family could eventually lessen when it comes to that expense. Make it as fun as possible for your children, and they will so enjoy that sandwich when they get to school.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's move on to some other ideas. So we've talked about cutting down expenses and increasing revenues, right? What other tips can you give people?
Well,
so now you've made it through January,
yes.
and you may have been able to meet the minimum of expenses, but the debt, some of these loans and stuff, they don't really kick in until, I think, a month, or I don't know.
So
I don't know how it works.
Yeah, if you've borrowed, usually it will probably be the end of January or February that you'll start.
So now you have this large debt that you have to figure your way through.
Well, actually, it's large in the sense that you have this liability, but nowadays they make it such that your monthly payment, you can make, you could do your monthly payment, and that makes it. So sometimes that is what pull you in.
Yes.
This is a small payment, I could make it every month or every week, and so I'm in a good place. You need to make a plan.
Okay.
It is important for you to have financial goals, for example. What do you want to accomplish? Because if you don't, anything, you will just grab at anything. So it's important for you to really think about what you want to accomplish, so that you don't get sidetracked by these things that are not so important. Nobody borrows to fund an emergency fund. You understand me? You borrow when the emergency is on you, and you have to. You don't have any option but to borrow. So a part of your plan might be, you know what? I need to fund an emergency fund. Really put some money aside.
That's a good idea.
So let's bring it back to a realistic scenario. So okay, we've made it. I did a barbecue sale, or I made powder buns and sell them. Right? I made some money. It made me through not having a salary for January, and now I have to pay attention to all the people that I now owe. I have my regular, let's say, credit card debt. I have my loan at the credit union, loan at the bank. I may have borrowed from my aunt or uncle. I got a payday loan too, and I have all these different people that I owe. And quite frankly, I probably can't afford to pay them all. Courts is coming knocking too. All these things are just there.
At you.
How do I prioritize who I'll pay and how I'll pay when I know I can't cover all the debt? Because that's where I really get stressed out.
Okay, write it down. Write down all that you owe. All that you owe, and the dates when you need to pay. Because some people, it might be that I need to pay. Your financial institutions, you don't want to pay late fees and so on. So those are priority. Of course, your bills. Important. Your rent or your mortgage, your utility, those things.
Mortgage especially.
Write it down so that you know where you are. You know what your situation is. And then you look at each of them and you prioritize. As we mentioned before, like the utilities, the rent, mortgage, and so on. The financial institutions.
But which one? That's what I'm going to ask. If I have all these different, the credit union, the bank, the payday loan, the family money that I borrowed, and even the payment plans I've made with the department stores.
You need to negotiate as well, so that is very important. So when you've written it down, you will see what the situation is, and you'll be able to prioritize to see which one I don't have any leeway here. Maybe I could speak with my sister, my aunt, or so on to say I really can't make it. I could give you a little bit, but I will pay you at a later date. So you need to negotiate. You go to your credit union, you go to your bank. You don't want to wait until they call you. It's important that you go in and say, I won't be able to make such and such, and you talk. You have to really bring in your communication
really
skills.
do that?
Some people do. Some people do. And I tell you, the institutions, they prefer that you do that. So that they know where you are. They could probably tweak your payment because they want their money. They want their money back. And so it's communicating the problem, communicating where you are is very important.
Okay, so go and talk with the family member and be honest with what you can pay. You can do so the same with your credit union and your bank. And they have a preference if you go in and say, I really won't be able to make these payments. What about the high interest payday loans and quick cash options?
Those things, it's best if you get out of them as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And it all boils down to being disciplined, having a plan and sacrificing.
Yeah.
You want to get out of those because it's very, the interest that
those
you pay
are
is very
high interest. Yeah.
For your credit card, you can't go in and negotiate anything. You have a credit card bill to pay. You need to pay it.
Yeah.
So what the negotiation really is that they allow you to pay a minimum payment.
Okay.
So we're saying that you should be in a position, if you're not in a position to pay everything, then at least make your minimum payment so that you don't get charged.
Yeah.
But it does bring forth additional stress when knowing that you've done all this in December, leading up to Christmas. And then we need to now have the conversation, because I'm listening, and yes, I need to have these conversations with these people that I've borrowed from. But I think one of the most important conversations to have is there at the household, to tell everybody that, you know what, things will not be as good. We will not be eating so and so and so. How do we get this conversation on? What do we say around the table?
Around the table.
Yeah.
I mean, each person knows their family, and we always say too that this is not a conversation that we usually have.
We don't like talking money.
We don't like talking about money. Sometimes we fool ourselves thinking that we have it, and when we really don't. We want to be like our neighbors, when we really can't afford it. So it is a learning tool for your children as well, to get them into the conversation so that they can start to think about good decisions, good financial decisions, that they would have to make. So it is, for most people, it's not easy to talk to your family about we don't have the money to do certain things, but it is very necessary. So for each person, it's different. It might be the person who handles the purse string. Maybe they're the ones, or in some family, maybe
sometimes it's the spouse too. And I think John gave a very realistic
Mm.
scenario where some people are really more interested in keeping up appearances rather than tackling debt. And it may be that one person feels it, but the other one is more concerned about what people think.
And the important thing too, I think, is the conversation with everybody who is in this household, so that they could take up some kind of responsibility to bring things back to normal. Everybody will have a responsibility to do that, because they will be the ones who will be eating the sandwiches or making it, and things like that. So I think when the conversation is about, this is where we are, and you also bring in, we had a good time, we spent this a lot, we had a good time, but now we have to do certain things to make things back on track, to bring things back on track. And also for the future, we want to accomplish this. So it's good to have financial goals. We want to accomplish this. So these are some of the sacrifices that we have to make in order to accomplish whatever it is, whatever goal we have. Whether it is we want to go on this vacation next year, whether it is we need to buy a new car, whatever it is,
house repairs sometimes,
house repairs, things like that.
I want to go back to the excessive debt. In other words, you owe far more now than you can pay. So you're trying to prioritize who can get paid, and we've heard people in these situations. It's very stressful because you just can't meet your obligations. What are your thoughts on consolidating the debt or borrowing to pay off?
Each situation is different, so you don't want to, for example, if you have a debt that you will finish paying it in 5 months, I don't think it makes sense to add that to a debt that you'll be stretching out for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Try and sacrifice to get that, finish with that one, and so consolidation is good too if you're in a situation if you can, yes. But the important thing is that you don't get there again. Because how much longer can you keep on doing this without really being at the end of your rope? So it really is a matter of looking on your situation and see what you should be doing to make sure that you're not in that position again.
And financial stress is a heavy stress to carry when you feel that you cannot provide. And you also have people who are banging on your door for collection.
It is.
So are there any right or wrong times that you can tell people when to consolidate, when not to?
Well, let me see. It depends on again, where you are,
okay.
right? Where you are.
So let's use the same scenario. I owe everywhere.
Everybody, yes.
I owe the payday, I owe the family member, I owe the credit union and the bank.
Yeah.
And probably more.
Yeah. That's something that you could probably look at, because when you consolidate as well, what it really does, it brings everything together, and what it should do, I should say, it brings everything together so that you have fewer payments.
Yeah.
And that your payment now becomes more affordable, right?
Yeah.
So you will look on each of those. You will look at to see if you have some debt that you could bring together. You could borrow from one institution, pay off the other, and just make it one debt. So that makes it more affordable sometimes.
Yeah.
You might have some lower interest debt that you might have to add together with one from a higher at a higher rate. But at the end of the day, it's looking at the entire picture to see if this will take you out of help you moving.
Yeah, I get what
move
you're
forward,
saying. You don't want
right?
people to think that just borrowing is always the solution.
Exactly.
To getting out of debt.
Getting out of debt, exactly.
And what about borrowing to pay off your credit cards? Quite a few people do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have a lower interest, rate debt, but then again, if you do that, the important thing is don't make it. Just use it what you can afford.
Yeah.
Just use it to the extent that you can afford.
Yeah.
So that you don't get into that situation again, because you will reach to the end of the line. And then what do you do then?
And for some folks, it's a pretty feel to get a credit card out at a big store and just make a swipe, or you just make that tap.
Yeah.
But they fail to realize that when you're doing that, you're actually putting yourself in that bind.
Yeah.
No, and one of the things I wanted to touch on, and Marlene did, is there a right time or a wrong time to have a conversation with your family in terms of your debt? Like, for instance, we're in a Maga season, given, second day of January. Can we have that conversation today? To state what we want to do for next year, because some folks might prolong it and say, we'll wait till October, and then we'll talk about it and see where we could go afterwards. What are your thoughts on this?
The best time is always now. I think that the planning is important, right? Because you're in this situation now, but you don't want to be in the same situation or worse next year, January. So the time to talk about it really is now. And what should also come into the conversation is what we can do now during this year, so that next year January we're in a better place.
Yeah.
So that is where the planning and that is where the conversation really comes in, and it really starts with what do we want to achieve? Do we want to have the stress next January? No. So if we don't want to have this stress next January, what can we do this year to make things a little better?
And I'm glad you said that. And for those of you who are just joining us, this is important. So we have covered the recovery portion. So what you want to do in January is increase your income. Find some skill that you have to make some money to help you through January. Cut down on your expenses. Stop buying food. Don't go out and have drinks on Friday. Whatever excessive expense you have in January, cut those down. And then looking forward into the debt, write down and prioritize who needs to be paid and how. Have a conversation with family members you owe. Have a conversation with institutions that you owe. If you can, or if it's in your best interest, consolidate. But if not, just try to work out how you can pay. So this is where we're looking at recovering from the debt. And at the same time, we want to do all that recovery and all that work to just get your head back afloat. We want to make sure we're not sinking under again. So what strategies can we put into place? And we've all, I think this is a very honest conversation that people don't like to have. Sometimes we overextend, but the point is to learn the lesson. You were saying that this morning, so that we can not have this problem next January.
So a few things about Christmas that people do, and then we'll talk about putting a budget in place. But sometimes what people do, they start buying their gifts early. If they find something, they buy it early. They put aside their change, and this is what we're going to use for Christmas, so that this is what we have. This is the budget. Some people, they do things instead of spending money. So you take care of your children. If that is a skill that you have, you bake a cake. Things like that. You could do things rather than spending money for Christmas.
Yeah.
So there's just a few things that you could think about doing to make it a little easier at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Would you say that, and I've met a few people who have done this, and they say that it works, but not buying single gifts, buying one good gift for the family. And then which everybody would use. Because some folks might say, no, buy me one blender, because everybody want to use that. I don't want one blender.
Yeah.
No, but it's still transcending to everybody could actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it is a gift.
Yeah.
Would you advise this?
Well, yes, I would advise that very much indeed. And actually, you're the one who is
You
giving
decide.
the gift.
It's not the gift
you
receiver.
understand?
Yeah.
And again, you look on where you are.
Yeah.
Can you afford? What can you afford? You know.
Yeah.
You could do Christkinder.
Yeah.
That's large families do that.
Yeah.
You buy one gift.
Yeah.
And so
Somebody-
yes,
And
we
you exchange, just like you do in your
Yes.
workplace.
Just as you
yeah.
do in your workplace.
Yeah.
You
can
decide.
opt out of your work one if you can't afford it as
That's
well.
true.
Yeah.
It boils down to what you can afford.
Yeah.
So sometimes it could be that you could say, this year I will not be giving gifts because I cannot afford it. You know,
Yeah.
that might, some people might not understand that, but you know where you are.
Yeah. Mhm.
And you know what you have to do. So, you know, that's something that you could think about doing as well. I can't afford gifts this year, be honest.
Yeah.
So that takes the burden off me, because I won't be burdened.
Mm-hmm.
But it also takes the burden off you, that if you don't want to give me a gift, that is okay.
Or lower your budget for gifts too. If you want to spend no more than $25 on each child in the family, you
Yeah,
can find
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You can.
You look dismayed when I said,
Yeah.
let's not give
But-
thinking.
but here's the thing, and this is where we started the conversation. If
Yeah.
we were to tally all the expenses, it's not just gifts, although I would admit that probably gifts are one of it's a bigger part of the
yeah.
expense. But if you add in curtain and
Yeah.
rugs and
Yeah.
new furniture
Marley.
or reupholstering your furniture, curtains
Yeah.
especially, people love
There's no
new
need-
curtains.
Yeah. And Marlene, there's no need to buy a new set of curtain every year. You know, buy good quality things so that you can reuse them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you could have one or two sets of
And
curtains
rotate.
and rotate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
New
know.
ornaments. I know
You
some
don't-
people who buy new ornaments every year. So what I'm saying is there are other expenses. If
Yes,
you don't
you're
want
right.
to do
Not
the
only
gift,
gifts, you're right.
cut
You're
those
right.
down.
Yeah, you're right.
So that perhaps you can put that only into gifts and not
Yeah.
have all the
Yeah.
expenses.
You're right. It is not only gifts. Indeed.
And if you have family members who are judging you if you have new curtains, or friends who are judging you by that, you need to do some reevaluation
Yes.
there. That's my thought.
And you know, right on board there with you, because I think that the people who loves you would always support you rather than bring you down because you couldn't
Yeah,
afford.
yeah.
But one of the things that came to mind, and like you mentioned, I was so we've bundled everything. Went into the banks, went to the loan sharks and talked to them. We found out which is important. One of the things that we hear people say is that, okay, I've settled things here and now I'm making my payment, but I don't want to check on how much because it brings me back into that stressful thought of that, you know what, I have so much more months to go. How important it is for checks and balances?
It's something that should be done on a regular basis. Because if you don't do that, you could end up in the same situation that you were before, right? And that is why a plan is important. You know, we don't like to talk about putting a budget together. The first step, one of the first things that you have to think about is what you want to achieve. And then you figure out how much you're making.
Yeah.
'Cause sometimes somehow we divorce ourselves from what we
What
actually
we actually
making
receive.
and what we can afford.
Or
you
you
know?
have an idea of what you make, but you forget all the deductions that actually
Yes,
come out and
you
it's half
know,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it is really taking control.
Yeah.
That is it. Taking control, and don't let this thing control you.
Okay, so I have another practical question. So we talked about resolving your debt, and we spoke so much about having an emergency fund. Should you still be saving while recovering from debt?
Yes. Sometimes you can't though. Sometimes
Well, I
you,
was gonna say,
you know,
if
sometimes
you
you
can,
can't.
you
Yeah.
do it, yeah.
Sometimes you can't eke out anything.
Yeah.
But that is why you know the taking control is important. The
Yeah.
seeing how you could make a little bit more income, cutting down on your expenses. For example, you might get your income tax return. You might get a bonus. You might do you have a special skill. You earn income from that.
Yeah.
You could say, this I am going to put this away.
Yeah.
I'm going to save this if I need to boost up my savings, or I'm going to put this in my
Yeah.
emergency fund. You know, sacrificing, taking control. These are hard words,
Yeah.
but they work.
Yeah.
You know, it really, it works. And you can't just not take control of it
Yeah.
because, you know, we've seen a lot of cases where
It's not a problem you can ignore.
can't be
And,
ignored. Yeah.
and I think that's the important thing for everybody to remember this
Yeah.
morning. You know, it's a problem you have to tackle
Yeah.
at some point. So
Yeah.
just, you know, dig your heels in and get started now.
Yeah.
So you have this great article you were telling us about. I'm
Yes.
so excited to hear about it. So Karine did her homework and she found an article about a couple who became debt-free
By the time they were 41.
by the time they were 41 years
Yeah,
old.
and they had about 3 or 4 children.
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
So these people have some super helpful tips. I'd say secrets even that Karine has researched and is going to share with us. So
Okay.
all of them may not be applicable,
Yeah.
but something may work for you.
Yes.
And I think this is a great way to start the
Yes.
year. So let's
Yes.
do it.
Okay, and a lot of them are things that we have spoken about before, right? So the first one is they make financial goals. They have short-term, long-term, medium goals, and they don't lose sight of them. So they write them down. They have them right there, front and center, so that they, you know, they keep it in mind. They make a budget. They operate by a budget, and they find ways to stick to the budget.
Yeah.
They save regularly. They give. They say they tithe. They give
Wow.
back.
Yeah.
And so it could be to the church, it could be, you know, wherever you are. If you're going to church, you give your money back to the Lord. If you are not, then you give back to somebody.
To another
you know?
organization.
Yeah. They discuss and agree on major purchases. So nobody goes out and buy the 50-inch TV without the other one knowing and things like that. So, you know. Being frugal was a serious matter. It's not just in December that they're in January that they're thinking, oh, we have to cut back. It is something that they do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking they had an objective. They wanted to be debt-free by the time they were 41, and this, you know, they made the sacrifices to do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, having your goals are important. They have allowances. So, yeah.
So it's not all sacrifice.
That's right. You have your allowances to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And part of the article said that one member of the family, they saved their allowances so that they could do a big purchase, you know, something big that they want,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
They lived within their means at all times, and that was in caps. Lived within their means at all times. Yeah. So, and they also said that doesn't mean that they don't, you know, stray from time to time, but it isn't something that would break the bank or break, you know, the what their focus was on. They said no to a lot of things. So, big Christmas presents. They worked hard, meaning that sometimes they had more than one job.
Yeah.
They worked hard and they worked to the best of their abilities, right? Worked hard, work when you can. They lived on one income. So they were a couple with children, but they lived on one income.
Wow. Yeah. With 3 children.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, some of these mightn't work for everybody, but you know, you could pick out some that might work. Yeah. They paid cash for everything. They used a credit card, but the credit card was fully paid off at the end of each month when it was due. They paid interest on nothing except the mortgage. That means they borrowed for nothing.
Wow.
Only the house. Only the houses.
Oh,
they have more than one house, yeah. They build up a fully funded emergency fund. And part of the article said that a child was ill, they had seizure, and they had to spend some extra money, and it was a stress-free, except for the fact that the child was ill.
Yeah,
it was
because they had the money to cover it.
They had the money to take care of it.
Financially stress-free.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They kept learning about financial matters. You know, they did that. They researched first before they bought anything. You know, research so that if you have to replace the fridge, you get the best one.
Yes.
You know, we have the best reviews and so on. You know, the big appliances. They saved for down payment on their houses so that they were able to keep the mortgage payment at a low rate, and they paid attention to interest rates. So they
shopped around.
Yes, for the mortgage, they paid attention to interest rate. Yeah. So I thought that was useful.
Very much.
You know, there maybe one or two things out there that some people can apply to their own situation.
Yeah.
And it's an example of how things are possible. You
Yeah.
know, you're not talking about, and one of the things you said earlier that has stuck with me is that it's a choice you make on your own.
Yeah.
It's not going to be something that will come easy.
Yeah.
It means that you have to make a
Yeah.
decision to live your life differently
Yeah.
so that your finances will be differently,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
right.
Well, Corinne, that was the
that was
first
good.
tough money topic for the year. We'll
2019.
definitely have more as the
Yeah.
year progresses.
Yeah.
But we really thank you for coming in and giving us some great, useful tips so that we can all recover from our Christmas
Yeah.
expenses.
Thank
And
you.
hopefully not be in that situation next
Again, next
January.
year. Yeah. That can be a goal you set
Yes,
for yourself
that's
this
gonna be
year.
good indeed.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a break now. And when we come back, we'll be talking about healthy habits for the new year. And we're talking basketball. So stay tuned.